Hi, everybody, and welcome to GLP's 10 out of 10. And with us this week is lighting designer Patrick Woodroffe. Patrick is one of the most well-known and well-regarded lighting designers in the live entertainment industry. In a career that spans more than 3 decades so far, Patrick has worked with an incredible roster of performers in every corner of the world and in a full portfolio of events: theatre, opera, dance, film, television, art projects, architectural lighting, exhibitions, and a list of live music credits unlike any other. You'll be hard pushed not to have seen one of his designs at some point. A few years ago, Patrick teamed up with Adam Bassett to form Woodroffe Bassett Design, which has grown to become one of the best known and most prolific lighting design brands operating today. Following his work on the opening and closing ceremonies of the London 2012 Olympic Games, Patrick was awarded the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Patrick says, collaborating with artists, designers, directors, and producers to bring their performances and creations to life with light is a marvelous way to earn a living. We love our jobs. Welcome, Patrick Woodroffe.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
It's
I'm in
fantastic.
good company. I've really enjoyed the other ones I've seen. And I should start by owning up to Ethan Webber's question, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you, the Spinal Tap moment? And he was at Madison Square Garden and he said very discreetly, somebody leant forward. Well, that would have been me. Pressing the button on lighting and plunging the stage into darkness.
Yeah.
It's so sweet, Ethan. So anyway, I own up to that.
You didn't put the name out. That's fantastic. That's great to join that part of the story together. That's all awesome. It's great to have you here, and obviously it's fantastic. It's fantastic looking at your studio behind you and seeing all of the memorabilia and bits.
Yeah, I was just looking. That's Mark Fisher. Can you see Mark Fisher up there? I'm not pointing
Mark up there. The fantastic architect.
And as I was showing you before, very proudly, if I move over, you can just see in the background hanging up. That is a VL1, and there's only 3 of them left in the world, and one of them's there.
That's fantastic.
I look at it quite often, and I think, well, it changed our lives. The moving light changed our lives, and as designers and just in our careers. Suddenly there was a job that no one else had before, which is to paint properly with light. So I look at that every day. I'm quite inspired.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic to have one of those as a piece of memorabilia. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, changed the course of an industry completely for all of us. So, we've got our 10 questions that we want to pose to you. So let's maybe crack on with the first one. And that is, what was your first show as a designer?
Well, remember when I started, you didn't really have lighting designers. You just had somebody, you just do the lights. And I worked for a little company, lighting company in London called ESB, run by Brian Croft. And we would pack up a load of lights into a truck with a little simple 2 preset lighting board. And sometimes Americans would bring a lighting designer over, and that was quite exciting for us to see a proper lighting designer. But otherwise you'd do the lights. And I think the first band I did the lights for was the Osmonds.
Okay.
And it was a little tour, and it was me and Bill Wally. Do you remember Bill Wally? He invented the Avo Lights board.
Right.
Finally, he disappeared I haven't seen him for years and years and years. But he and I went out, and I think we almost took it in turns to do the lights for the Osmonds. But I remember doing a show at Earl's Court with the Osmond brothers. And they were like the biggest band on the planet, the first real boy band,
Right.
And they'd come up with this amazing thing, which was they used a Foy's flying system, and no one had ever used that in a rock concert. It was used for Peter Pan at the Panto. And they came out on stage, the 5 of them lined up with 10,000 screaming kids, and Donnie was the one they all loved. And they started with Crazy Horses, wow, wow. And at the first chorus, he just took off from the stage, and he just flew all the way up the center of Earl's Court, literally touching distance above their heads to the end of the arena, and he turned around and he came back, and it was one of the most thrilling things I'd ever seen. And that was one of the first tours I ever did. Yeah,
that's incredible. That's incredible. And to be pushing that level of production technology, as you say, at that point in time, that's
yeah, everyone had seen all that stuff. They were great. They were a very nice bunch. I like them.
Great crowd to hang out with. That's brilliant. So I'm sure, obviously, over such an awesome career there's been the odd, apart from Ethan's moment at Madison Square Garden, I'm sure you must have had a spinal tap moment of your own when everything seemed to be going so well and so fine, and then it suddenly turned.
You can, but remember, with lighting, you can get away with it. You know, if you're doing sound and the microphones goes down, that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
But I will tell you about I remember doing Swan Lake at the Albert Hall in the round with 24 VL1s. It was the first time anyone had used a Very Light in opera or ballet or anything like that. And it went very well, our dress rehearsal, and then it was the night of the premiere. And I'd come in early that day because I wanted to add one little change. And Swan Lake in the Round is a beautiful piece. It has 4 acts, and the first and the third acts are known as the white acts. And that's where you have, 1,000, well, in that case, there were 120 swans in white tutus on the circular stage in the middle of the Albert Hall, dry ice, the most beautiful thing you'd seen. And as the music built over that, the 10 minutes of the piece, it started very dark blue, a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter. It was a fabulous spectacle. And I wanted to put in an extra cue. And Dave Hill was programming the show, and he wasn't in. He was a bit late that day. But there was a tech there, and I said, can you just do it? It's in between cue 20 and 21. I want to put in another cue, and it just changes it from a medium blue to a slightly lighter blue before it goes to the steel blue. Yeah, no problem. And I said, make sure it all works fine. Have you checked the marking? I knew a little bit about programming. He checked, yes, it comes from he'd checked the cue that it came from, and then it went into this. Everything was fine.
Right.
Anyway, it was the opening night. Princess Diana was there. We were all introduced to Princess Diana. Muhammad Al-Fayed was there for some reason. He had paid for it all. And I was up in the box with my family, a glass of champagne. Came up to this moment. There was the medium blue clue, beautiful, little bit lifting the music. Oh, elegantly, all the lights beautifully to this new color I put in. And I completely relaxed. I thought, that was fantastic. Until the cue that followed, at which point 120 white swans on the Albert Hall stage all turned to green, to red, to blue, to yellow, to purple, and then to the steel blue again. He hadn't got the cue following.
Right.
And there's no way, most things you can get away with. I always remember seeing a Willie Williams show and some ballad for U2, and he had all the strobe lights going. And it was fantastic because he chose to do that, and it worked,
Right.
But I couldn't ever think that I had planned to light Swan Lake in green, yellow, blue, and purple. So that's mine. I own up to that one.
That's the one. That's the one. That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. And in front of an audience like that, like you say, that's a real moment to just cringe and curl up into a ball.
Yeah.
So next, our next question is, what's the best piece of advice that anyone has ever given you?
Well, I think I've shared this one before, but the first time I worked for the Rolling Stones was in 1982. And it was a warm-up show for their European tour, and it was at the Aberdeen Playhouse. And I hadn't met any of the band in those days. Didn't really meet them, I think I'd sort of, met Mick Jagger en passant. Somebody had said, "This is Patrick," but that was about it.
Right.
Mick Brigden, who was their sort of creative director at the time, just before the show, he said, "Well, why don't you come down and talk to Mick and meet him properly and see if he's got any thoughts, And I went down to the bowels of the earth, one of those funny old English Scottish theatres, smelly little corridors, to his dressing room, and, right at the bottom. And I can see him now sitting in a beautiful white makeup chair with Jerry Hall, his wife at the time, looking fabulous with a cigarette on. And I was introduced. "Well, hello," said Jerry. And Mick said, "Hi." And Mick Brigden said, "Any tips for Patrick? Anything you want to say to him about the lighting?" And Mick said, "Well," he said, "I guess bright for the fast numbers and darker for the ballads." And that was it.
No, it's right.
Something that I've stuck to for 35 years.
You built a career from that with the
That was very good advice. I also remember Mark Brickman saying to me once that any song that was written in a minor key should be lit in blue. And that's sort of something that is easily adhered to,
Yeah, that's interesting as well. Wow, that's brilliant. Keep it simple, I guess. is the advice there. Wow. Over your career professionally, I mean, what would you say is your proudest achievement?
Well, I think, it's really difficult, and often the proudest one is the show you've just done, and that's sort of how it should be. That's the one that's in your mind. Also, in my dotage, I seem to forget all the things that I've done before, except the one I've just done.
Right.
But of course, the Olympics would have to be up there because it was such a public thing, and you wouldn't really have wanted to get it wrong. But also, we were working under quite duress. We were following the Beijing Olympics, which was the greatest show on earth, the Mark Fisher show that Mark Fisher did, beautifully lit, but with nobody really knows, 5,000 lights, maybe 10,000 lights. We really don't know. And so we were following that. We didn't have enough lights. We managed to get a few as we went along. The weather was terrible. A lot of things that really could have gone wrong. And the press wasn't with us either. Anyway, the show happened. It was a big success. We were very lucky to have got the pixels in the seats, which were used, that had been put in for video, but were hardly used for video, used 3 or 4 times in the show, I think. So we kind of purloined them and used them as extra lights in our lighting system. So anyway, it was a big success, but more than anything, it was just an enormous relief that we hadn't completely cocked it up. But I think more than that, I was thinking back to some other shows I'd done, and I thought one that I'm very proud of was Romeo and Juliet at the Vienna Staatsopera, and it was the first opera I'd ever done. And the director was a guy called Jürgen Flimm, a German director. And he had seen a show that I'd done in Germany, Marius Müller-Westernhagen. And it was just a big rock concert, but it was a spectacle. And he had been asked to do Romeo and Juliet at the Staatsopera. And he said, why don't I do it just with lighting and not use any scenery? Of course, the Staatsopera loved that because they wouldn't have to build a set. But I said, hang on a minute, I can't just use the lights that you've got. If I'm going to do a show just with lighting, I've got to have some proper lights. And persuaded them to buy 40 Komars, I think they were, moving lights.
Right.
And we did the whole show with just lighting. We didn't even have a balcony. We had I can't remember what we did, a illuminated disc on the stage or something.
Wow.
So that was great because no one had ever done it before. And then a couple of other opera houses asked me to do the same thing. And I remember going to Helsinki to do Giulio Cesare, a Handel opera. And they had a fabulous lighting system of, I don't know, 100 moving lights or something. Yeah. Miki Kuntu has done work there before. He's done really good jobs. But in those days, no one had really used them for anything. And I went in and I asked them, I said, just turn on all the lights that you've got. So they turned them all on, a bit smoky. We were doing some tests. The director was there. And suddenly 100 lights come on the stage, which they'd sort of never even seen that before because they would use them for their repertory shows to be able to have, in this opera, scene 5, act 3, we'll use one moving light there to pick up somebody there.
Right.
And I said, oh, they look good. I said, can you just take all the lights and just sweep them into the audience? I just want to see. And I did that. And they thought this was some stroke of genius. They'd never seen this before. So simply doing all the boring things that we do with moving lights.
Right.
So that was fun. I guess those shows were pretty special ones.
Right. That's great. That's great. You can bring all of that kind of expertise and that knowledge to a world that wasn't used to it.
A different world, yeah.
That's incredible. Now, I have to just add at this point that, just jumping back to what you said about the Olympics, I watched the Olympic diaries that you released back at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was absolutely fascinating to hear you read them and to hear that journey through the whole process. And certainly for anybody who hasn't listened to them yet, you need to go to the Woodroffe Bassett YouTube channel and watch them. They're absolutely fascinating.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah. I was going to say something, but yeah, once a year, usually about once a year at Christmas, I watch that show, but I watch it with this amazing disc I got, which is the show call from this amazing woman, Julia, who called the show, the 250 people she was calling.
Right.
And it's the whole broadcast, it's the broadcast of the show with the music and the talking, but the thing that you hear all the time is her calling the show. And that is brilliant. It has me in tears every time, some marvelous dramatic moment and her keeping it all together. And
wow. I mean, certainly, absolutely something just incredible. And as you said, to follow up on what they've done in Beijing, where money was obviously no object. Completely completely different parameters that you have to work in.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So obviously we've all been spending a lot of time at home recently. What do you normally do in your downtime?
Well, it's changed a bit. I mean, you know, I used to travel an awful lot all the time, and I travel slightly less now since I have Adam and our partner Terry, you know, and a little team. I don't travel quite as much, but still a lot. And really, when I got home, there was very little I'd want to do except to just be here with my family and live a normal life. But it's been quite interesting in lockdown. And I mean, I do all the things that people like to do: walk and read and write and cook and sleep and swim, all those things. Yeah. But in lockdown, it's been very different. And the one common factor that I hear as I talk to my friends is everyone says how quickly the time passes. And rather than the time dragging, which one might assume it would be the case, doing the same things every day and not being able to go out anywhere, I find the time flies by. And I haven't been watching much TV. There just seems to be things to do. I mean, I'm lucky. I live in the countryside and it's very quiet out here and it's lovely to walk and bicycle. But that's me, a normal life. And I like it. I read a lot and I write a lot. And that's me.
Just completely relaxing and turned off from.
I think so. And the other thing about the lockdown that's been quite interesting is that it seems to be relatively stress-free. I mean, I'm not a big worrier, but you know, I have some responsibility in the job I do, particularly if you're doing more than one job at a time, and there's things to do and situations to deal with, and things to be concerned about, and looking into the future as to the things that are going to happen this week and next week and the week after. And I don't have had that in the lockdown. You know, I never thought even now we're starting to do a little bit more work as it opens up a bit, but typically I thought about nothing except what I was going to do that day, maybe what I was going to have for supper that night. And that was it. I mean, there's a certain amount of worry, like, you know, never working again and losing everything that one spent years working out for. But apart from that, it seems to be a very stress-free period. And I think everyone's had a taste of that. And I think people like it.
That's very true. That's true. I could absolutely agree with that. Absolutely. That's yeah, good insight to it. It's nice not having that some of those concerns.
Day-to-day stress, yeah, very good.
Right. Yeah, biggest decision: hot dogs or burgers for dinner.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, you know, you've worked at every, as we mentioned, you know, in every corner of the world, and some venues that existed only for the shows that you were being a part of. But do you have a preferred venue, you know, a favorite venue from somewhere in the world?
Yeah, I mean, when I used to tour, when I lived in America and I used to go on long bus tours, then you'd know all the venues. And you'd go in and you'd meet some of the same people, and that was great. I think now, I mean, in England, I love to do shows at the Albert Hall. I love to watch shows at the Albert Hall, and it's a beautiful place to be. It's a lovely venue, and it's very intimate. And in America, I think Radio City is the same thing. It's the same sort of style. And we did a lovely thing with Adele there a couple of years ago, with Ez Devlin designed it. And we had projections not only on the stage, but over the whole of the interior of the building. That was pretty great.
Right.
But a really special venue is the Maracanã Stadium in Brazil. And I spend a lot of time in Brazil now, but the first time I ever went there was to do a show with Tina Turner. And not many people had performed there, certainly not in... There had been one Rock in Rio at that point, but no one had ever performed in the Maracanã Stadium, which at that time, maybe it still is now, is the largest stadium in the world. So it held 100,000 people. But this was the old Maracanã. They've done it up now. They did it up for the Olympics, but it was a shit place. It was smelly and it was dirty, but it was alive. And the first time I saw it, I went to Rio like a month before the show to meet the people who were going to direct the show and talk to the producers and the promoters to see what we could do in the stadium. And it was a Sunday, and they said, "Oh, we'll take you up there." The guy who took me up there, he took me up into this little elevator, which was not a public elevator. I guess it was some service elevator, just two of us inside this thing. And as we went up, he said, "Oh, you're going to see something special." And I could hear this sound in the background of a football crowd, and they're very vocal Brazilian audiences. Right? And we went up, and the doors opened, and I was standing behind the final row, the highest seat in the whole stadium, literally one pace forward, and it was the row of things. And as the door opened, there was just this roar, and there was 100,000 people in the football match going on below us.
Incredible.
And that was great. And we came back there a month later, and it's quite interesting working in what were known as third world countries in those days. But I mean, I've been played in lots of strange places around the world where they do incredibly enterprising things. And for Tina at the Maracanã, they had, Globo were filming it, they had a helicopter. They loved helicopter shots, you know.
Right.
And I said, well, we should light the roof, you know, the roof of the Maracanã. And they said, yeah, no problem, Patrick, and we'll get 1,000 par cans or whatever it was and light them around. And then I think I came back a week before, and I saw a lot of people up on the roof, and I said, oh, what are they doing? And they said, oh, they're painting the roof. We thought we'd paint it white so that the lights would stand out more. So they just sent, you know, 50 people up there for 3 weeks, probably sleeping up there, and they painted the whole roof of the Maracanã Stadium white just for the helicopter shot.
Wow.
Wouldn't do that at Wembley.
No, that's right. That's very true. That's very true. Wow, that's incredible. There's certainly, a passionate nation of people. I
love Brazil, and I went back there, and when we had, I did all the Rock in Rio festivals and the Hollywood Rock festivals, and there was a tiny lighting company run by a guy called Cesio Lima, and it was called LPL Lighting, and he hardly spoke English. He used to call at the help to translate for the follow spots or anything. But over the years, it's come on to be one of the biggest lighting companies in the world, and I go back pretty much every year to do something, either to do some help with something, or to take a show down there that I'm doing myself, or to visit Cesio. And it's the best country in the world for me. Danny Nolan, great lighting designer, who lived down there for a long time, told me a long time ago, he said, if they ever solve corruption in Brazil, it would be the greatest country in the world, because it has everything. It has, you know, the resources, the land, the scenery, the language, the culture, the architecture. It's an extraordinary country, beautiful country. Yeah,
no, that's very, very true. They've got a bit of everything, and obviously, and Rock in Rio is. I mean, I know they do now the kind of the split.
We still do what Rock in Rio is. Terry, my partner, who does the Rock in Rios and not only there, we've done Rock in Rio in America, in Las Vegas, in Lisbon. We do every other year. I mean, I think it's Lisbon this year, but I don't know whether it's going to happen or not. Whether they've cancelled it or not, maybe not. Don't know. We'll see.
Right.
But they'll be back next year for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. You mentioned that you do a lot of reading. In terms of music, if you were stuck on a desert island or stuck in lockdown, is there a particular artist or a particular album that you would just absolutely want to have close by that you could listen to?
I thought about, I had my record collection for a long time was big CD collection of, every CD that Phil Collins had made, every CD that the Rolling Stones made, every CD that Bob Dylan done. Because whenever you'd work with an artist, they would just send you all the CDs.
Right.
And, I have children who are now in their 30s, but as they were growing up, they would listen to their music and turn me on to music. But some years ago, I was introduced to Mark Ronson, who was the DJ Mark Ronson.
Yeah.
And he, and famous producer, but he had decided he wanted to do a tour with a little band. And somebody introduced me to him. He said, look, I'll do it, but we haven't really got any money and not quite sure what we want to do. And I said, well, listen, I think I'd love to work with you. He was a sweet guy. And I said, I'll work for you on two conditions. I'll do it for free on two conditions. The first is that if this turns into a proper career and you become a proper touring band, then you have to go back and pay me properly as if it had been. He said, yeah, no problem. Right. And I said, and the second thing is, I want you to educate me musically. I told him about my record collection and he went, I got it. And I'm trying to see if they're here somewhere. I can't find them. I'll find them somewhere. But the day that the tour opened, he came, he said, I've got something for you. And he opened his bag and he took out of it these 6 leather pouches, each one with a iPod in it. And each of the iPods was engraved. I can remember them. Soulful Sunday, Guitars Will Speak, Future Classics, Disco 2000, whatever it was. And it was his choice of 250 songs on each of these iPods.
Wow.
That he had chosen. And that was my musical education. And I still have them. put them on. If it's Sunday and I want to chill, I put it on. I mean, it's old days now. My children say to me, "Well, you haven't even got a charger for them," you know.
Right.
Anyway, sorry. That was how I was musically educated. If I had to choose somebody, it would be Stevie Wonder, I think. Right. I knew he was a favorite artist of mine, and I worked with him. I loved. I'm sure I told you I did he always used to talk to me about lighting. He's blind, right. Obviously, and he used to talk about vision as that other thing. And I thought, and we'd have quite late stoned conversations in my youth in his room about hippie stuff, you know, but he would talk about vision. And I thought, well, I can't describe to him what vision is. I couldn't describe to you a sense that didn't exist, you know, but I thought I could take that away from everybody in the audience. I could take that extra thing that he didn't have. I could take it away from the audience by turning all the lights out. And we used to do it every night on tour. And I was touring with him at the time. And he would, at the end of, halfway through the show, he would say, "Hey, Patrick, turn out the lights." And I would turn all the lights on the stage, and he would start to play Visions of My Mind. This beautiful song, There's Hope for a Better World. And the musicians would turn down their reading lights, and in the big venues, we'd get the emergency lights turned off. And for 7 minutes, he would play Visions of My Mind in complete darkness.
Wow.
And it was the best connection I'd ever seen between an audience and an artist. Yeah. So I would choose him, and if I had to choose a song, I'd choose Overjoyed, because it's a beautiful song. It was sort of like, I'd married Lucy at that time. But if by rights, the song I should choose is I Just Called to Say I Love You, which I have to say is probably the worst song that Stevie Wonder ever wrote. But I had just met my wife at that time, and we were having a sort of secret affair. And I would, before mobile phones, I would find a phone booth backstage in Germany or something, and I would call her to tell her I loved her. So that's the one by rights which I should choose, but I couldn't bear to hear it again because such a terrible song. So I choose Stevie Wonder, Overjoyed.
Overjoyed, there we go. That's a brilliant choice, and a brilliant musician. Obviously, still very,
he's
still very active.
The sweetest guy, lovely man.
We exhibit at an exhibition in California every year called the NAMM exhibition, which is all about music and musical education. And he visits every year, and there are lots of impromptu performance spaces set up in the surrounding areas and the lobbies and the hotels. And I remember once sitting in the lobby of one of the hotels having lunch, and there was this young, late teenager who was up on stage, just him and his guitar. And he was singing, I can't remember which song, maybe it was Overjoyed actually, that he was singing up on stage. And Stevie, with his entourage walked past. And he stopped, and he got up on stage and started singing with this kid who was just absolutely
blown. How beautiful.
Yeah, and it was just fantastic. Yeah, this is amazing that he cares absolutely about about his music and about people who are passionate about music. So very special guy. Absolutely incredible. Winding back, if you could go and visit the teenage Patrick Woodroffe, and you could give him one piece of advice, what piece of advice would you give him?
Quite often, you meet students or somebody will get in touch and ask that very question. And the more pragmatic answer I often give is, I've got two answers. One is light everything you can. So if you're at college, light your grandmother's birthday, or the little local band in the club, or your bathroom, or just learn to work with light, and also to observe it and keep a journal. And it can be an electronic journal, but to just notice. I mean, I notice light all the time. Obviously, that's our business. I see it all the time, not in the sunset, but also in a way that a shadow falls in an alleyway, or a piece of flashy lights in a shop somewhere, or a piece of architecture. So I that's what I would always suggest, is to just be aware of light, and to understand it and see it in all its wonderful forms. But I think if there was a more general piece of advice, one that I wish that I had had, it's to worry less.
Right.
And I mean, I can say that now at the grand old age of 66, that when I still worry about things, of course I do, professionally, if I'm working, is this going to be okay? Is this going to be okay? But what I have found is that invariably, the things that you worry about all turn out fine. It's one's own fear, it's one's own concern that is the worry. And I sometimes think it's bad enough that we have these high pressure jobs and we get upset and nervous and stressed about things, and then we beat ourselves up for worrying about it and say, well, why do I worry about this? Well, of course you worry about it so much. It's a complicated thing that we do. But now I realize that it's quite a wasted energy, and if there's any way you can find it, if anyone said to me, look, you just don't have to worry so much, things do usually turn out all right, and the times what they didn't turn all right, it's sort of okay anyway.
Right.
Worry less.
I guess you worry because you care.
You worry because you're frightened, and it's all one's own doubts and insecurities that comes up is what you're frightened about when you think the worst. When you have these mad conversations in your head with somebody you're not getting on with, or a director or an artist, or all the things that other person says to you in your head when you're having those futile arguments, all the things that are wrong about yourself, the things that you worry about. So
yeah.
And even when I am worrying, even when I'm in the middle of something, there is this little voice that sits on my shoulder that the voice of experience that tells me, don't worry, it'll be okay.
It'll be fine. Usually it'll be fine. But that is some great advice. Worry less. Yeah. If you could sit down with one person for they could be alive, they could be dead, for a cup of coffee and a casual conversation, who would that be?
Well, in the present circumstance, anybody, really, because I spoke to hardly anybody at all. I thought about it, and it sounds a bit grand, but I was thinking about Caravaggio, the 16th century Italian artist who was a master of light. And he painted these extraordinary pictures of natural light in a time when people weren't really doing that. They were much more prescribed, the paintings they were doing. And he also used to use for his models the real low life of Milan or Turin or wherever he lived, prostitutes and murderers and thieves. So they're very visceral, his paintings, but they're beautifully lit. And I figured if I could have an evening with him, go back in time, I'd get some wonderful, and I'd tell him about what I did. He'd probably be pretty fascinated in an Italian sort of a way. And you'd end up having a jolly good dinner afterwards and meeting some of his interesting friends.
That's right.
It'd be a good bet.
Take you to all his favourite hangouts.
There you go.
That would be brilliant. Wow, what a fantastic answer. And just like that, we're up to our final question. We've mentioned your work on the Olympic Games, so we've done a little twist on that. So in a moment, you're going to get a call from the British Olympic Committee, and they're gonna call you up. Now it could be for the Winter Games or the Summer Games, but the question is, so what sport are they going to call you up for? What would you like to have a go at? Well,
the thing is, when I watch sport on the television, I'm not very sporty myself. I used to be very sporty when I was younger. I could do all sorts of things, but when I'm an armchair watcher of sport, and I often think, I could do that. Why doesn't he do that? I watch the motor racing sometimes.
Right.
And I think, why didn't he just overtake him there? If it was me, I'd do that. And even on the running, when I see them doing the 1500 meters and they come into the last corner and the English guys, a few paces back, I say, well, if that was me, I'd just try that much harder. It can't be that difficult to do,
Just run faster.
So, but I'm not sure. Then the one I chose was fencing, only because I think they've got very cool gear, don't they? They look pretty fantastic in those nice uniforms, and it's very elegant, the thing. And also it doesn't look like you'd have to be that fit to do it, because it's all done in little bursts, isn't it? You're not having,
it's true. It's only a few steps forward and backwards.
And give me a nice épée or a foil or a saber. There's three of them, aren't there? And
yes,
that would be me.
That's right. No, it's a fascinating sport to watch.
Very good question. Now I'm trying to think what other people have chosen. Somebody chose a bobsleigh, I think, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah, Ethan was talking about the bobsled and the roof. So there's been a few different. One person did say they'd just sit it out and be a commentator.
Yeah, I could do the ski jump. I reckon I could do the ski jump if you had the bottle to do it.
Yeah.
You know, because you get up there, you face down, and the going down bit wouldn't be that difficult. You can keep your balance. It's not that, and they have the little tracks that you go in. You just have to choose the moment to.
Yeah.
Once you're up there, you just put your hands down by your sides, and you have to stop the skis wobbling a bit, and you hit the ground 50-50 that you'd stay on your feet, but it can't be that difficult. Ski jump, exactly. I wouldn't have thought so.
The easy bit is going down. Yeah. All you have to do is be able to land. That's it.
Yeah. Very good.
Make it very simple. Very simple. Patrick, thank you so much. It's been fascinating talking with you. Great insights, and just a brilliant conversation. Thank you very much. I hope that the lockdown continues to treat you and your family well.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us.